We have about 3 minutes for questions. Do any of the panelists have questions first off? You can raise your hands either physically or in the reactions. Okay, let me then find the ones in the chat. Oh, let me see, there's one here.
Well, I just asked Professor Richard a question. Can I repeat it here?
Yes, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you for your amazing presentation. But I'm not quite sure in which way or ways the manuscript of copy Hazine 1510 has been completed much later. Do you mean what Sucek and Chapman regarded as a forgery by scribes and artisans in Sultan Hussein Bayqara's court, or the Safavid or Ottoman changes made in the illustrations? Are you convinced that the text has also been completed in 903 Hijri onwards?
So, I'm not sure I can answer perfectly to your question. I think this manuscript witness of the need of documentation on the copy of old manuscripts of the Rashideddin corpus. And it was maybe completed in the Timurid time, and probably also later, but I think it's in this huge corpus of manuscripts around Rashid heritage, it's explanation. So speak about forgery, I'm not sure it's adequate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Maria Subtelny had both a question for Francis Richard and a comment on Professor Melvin Kushki.
Okay, thank you very much, Beatrice. So, Professor Richard, I was wondering, some of these seals of Shah Rukh have this devise. It has the little kind of like a squiggle, like a little trefoil or something that we see in other Timurid seals. But some of the seals of Shah Rukh don't have that. In the very first set of seals that you showed, the one seal had it and the second one didn't.
Yeah, it's a problem, because a lot of these seals are not very clear, because many seals are erased and maybe sometimes changed. It's difficult to explain. It seems that it was two steps in the collection, like taking of war, the constitution of the Inaugural of Charlotte, and no, I don't think it's forgeries, but I think it's different steps in the making of the seals, or some more classical, like the second seal. I showed the seal of the Charlotte and the Sultan Muhammad seal were very, very near the same shape, the same form.
Yeah.
I think we have to investigate a lot about these seals.
Yeah, because some of the seals of Sultan Hussein later on also have that devise. Yeah. I don't know whether you would call it a devise. It's a little symbol. You sometimes see it in manuscripts as sort of an ending, almost like a little bit of a talismanic ending at the end of a manuscript, indicating completion. So anyway, we could discuss this further. And I had just a comment for Matt, and that, and I'm sure you know this, but it just, since we're definitely on an Alexandrian theme, The Mongols as well. I mean, the Mongol hero was Alexander. And remember, there was a talk given by Oleg Grabar where they, because they didn't have sort of this mythical Shahnameh background, they more closely identified with him because he was a newcomer, so to speak. At least that was Grabar's argument. And there are a lot of illustrations. The focus in the Shahnamehs produced by the Ilkhanids was Alexander. So I don't think it was an invention of the Timurids. I think it was already there. I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh no, absolutely. My main gut feeling is that it's used more in a symbolic fashion under the Ilkhanids. Obviously, it's associated with various occult sciences like geomancy, astrology, alchemy, and so on, but it's not systematized in any sort of theory of empire, right?
Yeah.
It's more shamanic or whatever you want to, terrible word we want to use. I argue that it's with Ibn Turka that you get a systematic scientific consolidation of the Ilkhanid legacy, but with treatises that really set out to transform their readers into philosopher kings on the model of Alexander and the Sir al-Asrar that was not realized before this generation. And again, Iskandar was his best hope for Alexander, like rule. But Iskandar is the first ruler in the early modern era to openly say letterism and astrology are the technologies of empire. And that was what Ibn Turka was pushing for. And you certainly have like Nasruddin Tusi going in that kind of direction, right? But it's not consolidated. It's kind of symbolic, and there's science as well, but it's not synthesized.
Right. Thank you.
So Shiva, had you asked me to say something? Do you want me to? Shiva, are you?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
I will thank the three last speakers for their excellent presentations. And Shiva had asked me to say a few words at the end. I must say I do not feel like the most qualified to do so, since I'm very much a social and political historian, but I've learned a great deal the last 2 days. And so thank you very much for organizing this. It's I think been a great success. One of the things that I noticed, perhaps because I've worked on this a little bit in ideology, is this whole question of Eastern and Western Iran. And what strikes me here is how much now is moving again from west to east. So in the Selçukid period, we saw I knew Persian, all that moving west, along with the sort of bureaucrats who are rather resented in the west because they came from the east. But I noticed both in the artistic and to some extent in the scholarly realm that there was a movement of the Jalayirid particularly, but that comes out of the Ilkhanid. There's new styles and more sophisticated miniatures moving east again, with the exception, of course. Now, actually, Shahrukh is not an exception. He goes more for the Shiraz and Baysunghur more for the Jalayirid, but an interesting sort of move, sign that Persian culture really moved west and took hold there. Also, I'd say one of the things that in a way was heartening about this was to see how complex and how continuous the making of a manuscript was. We've talked so much about dismemberment rather. And here we saw in some case the slow creation of a Jalayirid manuscript from early sort of setting it out to later coloring, to the Timurid restoration, to the Safavid dealing with it. And now, of course, the attempt to create digital reconstructions of these manuscripts at long last to preserve them, though, of course, exactly which point you're going to preserve them at, I suppose, is a question for some. I'd say the other thing I would bring up would be the number of open questions. One of the themes of this conference has been how much more work needs to be done and how much you can discover about what is missing from manuscripts. So we are now looking for a from Maria's paper for the missing illustration of Baysunghur in the Sirah. We're trying to figure out how the Shiraz and anthology got to Herat. And in another sense, another field, we're looking for, the understanding of who read and how they read the later Khamses, the later Masnavis of Amir Khosrow. So I think an excellent beginning to a continuing quest. And all historians, I think, recognize the fact that you can't get the big picture right unless you get the details right. So I guess good luck to us all. And thanks a lot to the organizers.